particularly delighted to see such a diverse group of professionals gather here today, united by a shared commitment to build financial capacity and unlock unlocking the vast investment opportunity available in industrial energy efficiency and resource-efficient cleaner production Nigeria project. In today's reality, marked by high energy costs and resource inefficiency, financial literacy and sound investment strategies are not just desirable, they are essential, whether for individual, small enterprise, or larger corporate. The ability to manage resource wisely and make informed investment decisions is crucial to achieving sustainable growth. This workshop has been thoughtfully designed to equip participants with practical knowledge and tools that will empower them to make better financial decisions, identify funding opportunities, and maximize savings generated through the GEF-UNIDO Industrial Energy Efficiency and Resource-Efficient Cleaner Production Initiative. We are privileged to have a team of experienced facilitators and dedicated participants with us. Over the course of this training, the facilitator will guide us through insightful sessions covering a wide range of topics from finance and investment management to risk assessment and emerging financial technologies. I therefore encourage every participant to take full advantage of this opportunity, ask questions, engage actively, and network with others. Let this serve as a platform for learning, collaboration, and future partnership. I'm confident that the outcome of this training will be impactful, not only in addressing our energy challenges and reduce production costs, but also contribute meaningfully to the national economic development. Thank you once again for being here. I wish you all a fruitful and rewarding workshop. Thank you. So we move straight to the third on the agenda, which is introduction and expectation of participants. Let me say here that we have three categories of audience here. We have the industries, which are we refer to as the celebrants. Then we have some expert-based group. Then we have some financial institutions here with us. So we start just short introduction so that we will know who and who is in the hall and your expectation. Please.
Good morning all. My expectation is to learn more from what I learned previously, and then with respect to finance and investment technologies to minimize costs.
Let's make it very swift, please.
Good morning, everyone. Adejola Sumi is my name. I'm from Promasido, Nigeria Limited. So I'm here to understand more about how to calculate the savings from industrial energy efficiency that is going from industry. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So we are Daniel from Promasido. So my expectation is to get more insights on process efficiency regarding energy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Babatunde Ajala from the Bank of Industry. The Bank of Industry is a financial institution that supports industries in procuring plants and machinery to support their production. So two things for me here. One is to see the area of needs of the industries, and two, to also provide financial solutions for them towards acquiring things that will help in their production processes. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's Olumide Olawale. I'm from GreenWeaves Limited. The area of learning for me will be to.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mrs. Ifoman Madam. I work for Noxy Limited as the Safety Operations Manager. My being here today is to know more on the strategies of energy efficiency and how it applies effectively in the field.
I produce pencil. I'm based in Lagos here. I'm here to enhance my knowledge on finance, business planning, and corporate strategy. Thank you.
I'm Solomon from Promasido. Today to understand financial metrics that will be used in assessing energy efficiency projects.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Arise Onarise from the Food and Beverage Recycling Alliance.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Akiri Oluwabusola. Good morning, everyone. My name is Akiri Oluwabusola. I'm from the Food and Beverage Recycling Alliance. I'm here to enhance my knowledge on finance and investment aspect of energy. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Engineer Udukoya from the Grand Institute of Engineers, the Environmental Division. And we're here to enhance our knowledge, trying to develop new content and new local content that will be able to use to survive in the energy efficiency sector. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. At least that's part of me to courtesies. But it's a pleasure seeing many of us again. I would just quickly like to address few issues that I picked in the course of our sharing our expectations. The first one that talked about learning more about the template for calculation, the metrics, is not here. It is when we are having the next technical session that you look at that and using case studies for us to look at realities. How do you calculate this? How do you say we need to do this really? We have learned this and we have found out that there are gaps, and these are your energy waste or spots, and you now more like to teach you how to make that case before your management. And because there is a funding component which is with Bank of Industry to also help you in submitting a proposal that will make sense to them. So we'll be looking at those technical metrics when we have a technical session, which we'll soon be having. We will write you. But the reason why we decided to bring everybody together, whether you have engineering background, I've explained this the last time, is that it's like you have enrolled in a school, let's say in a university, to read economics. For example, you won't be taught only economics. You do other courses. You do English, you do accounting, you can even do some courses in banking and finance, depending on, or history or sociology, depending on. So we felt, well, in the wisdom of UNIDO, that when we are doing the funding components, anything that has to do with the financial aspect, we should also bring you. But what we have done is, we now requested that your management should add someone from the finance unit to also be part of it. Do you know why? As an engineer or the technical expert, by the time you finish building, putting things together, the technical aspect, okay, we need to change this boiler, we need to do this. You need the accounting or finance department to also support you. There are some aspects that has to do with cash flow and other things that will help you put up a compelling business case before your bankers. So I felt I should address that. We are not missing anything, and you are not missing anything. Trust us, we are tracking the whole process, but we just felt everybody should have a feel of whatever we have in the module for the course. The second one that I observed, I know it's our style. I couldn't pick some things that some of us said. We chose to use our very, very, very low and very gentle voices. So we couldn't pick. For those that have been part of our workshop before, you know it's an opportunity for us to pick one or two things. So I want to plead with you, when you have an opportunity to speak, please speak in a manner that we can hear you and can also be able to make input and provide relevant answers. So straight to what we have on our agenda, we'll be having what we call a general assessment. I know naturally when people hear of assessment, there's a way we feel about it, but there's no cause for alarm. For those of us that have been part of this training all along, you are aware that this is a certification program. That at the end of it, and that's why we insist that it's the same set from industries. You send the same set of persons. So there's a need for us to do just something, the little assessment. You also recall, for those that pay attention to whatever we share, that we mention at a particular stage, we will have to sieve. We have to sieve, and you know what that means. So that we have a clear-cut and transparent means of sieving. Do you understand? So we just introduce, it's not something very difficult for us to do. They are largely in OBJ's objectives, and they have nothing to do with finance, business strategy. They are generally talking about what you have learned before on IEE, introduction to IEE, introduction to RECP, introduction to methodologies, RECP and IEE methodologies, and other components. So we'll be using the first 15 minutes to do the assessment. Please do me a favor, put the name of your company and put your name. All you need to do is just tick the answers. Luckily, majority of them are objective questions. And I know the challenge with objective questions sometimes, as simple as they may be, if it's something you don't know, you don't know. Except you want to do tumbo. But I want to assure you our case will not be like the case of JAM. It's hard copy. It's hard copy, and then we'll pick it up. So our national expert on IEE, I think it's time for you to quickly share, distribute what you have to everyone. I will tell you when the time start counting. For those that are finance people that are just joining us, you have liberty not to write. You have liberty not to write. But if you have been part and parcel of this program, if you don't write, we will know. We have the details. You know, after workshop, we'll show the screen on the screen your name, designation, company, phone number. So if we don't see, you're also putting us in a position to write your management to say the quality time that you have approved for this person to come and learn this for the benefit of the person and the benefit of the industry. The person have not made judicious use of it. But I know we are responsible people. So I would like us to quickly do that. But if you're a finance person that is just being introduced, this is your first interface with this project, please, you are free not to. But if you want to, you are also free to. We will take that into consideration while sorting out things. Be fast so that I can start the timing. Obafemi, or you call someone to support you. You can come, please support. Let no man or woman declare himself or herself a finance person today. If you're a technical person, who will find you out? But it's so simple, very, very simple. It's just to give us some yardstick which so that it won't be based on just initiative or any, not to give room for favoritism. Just have a yardstick to see, to say these people can benefit from this. These people can become part of the national pool. These people needs to do the advanced stage of the course, and these people should be certified. These people should just be given a certificate of participation, so that we have yardstick for. But I can assure you, they are pretty simple and easy if you have been part of the program and you have listened very well. If you don't have your paper yet, let me see your hand, your right hand up. You don't have, so that they can attend to you quickly. Because time is of essence and our national expert is around already, so that we can start. Some people have started already. We are breaking the rule. So I will reduce the time by 10 minutes. I'm seeing some people, they see now, bro. I don't need to, that's their problem. Okay, we can start now. We have just 15 minutes. Madam, no community effort. No community effort.
In case you're not too sure about your options, let's spend a minute here. So what's RECP? It's resource efficiency and cleaner production. Just from the name, you can already see that there's something about resources. That resources have to be used efficiently. There's production, that production has to be clean. That's all that big, that's everything that it is about, right? So we're saying, is there a way we can use resources in a way that is sustainable and cost effective? You can use resources whatever way you like some of our politicians do. But resource efficiency in the context of our industry is how we take resources. What resources are we talking about? Like energy, water, raw materials, and use those in a way that is not only sustainable, but also cost effective. And then cleaner production doesn't need too much English around it. It's essentially you want to produce stuff in a clean way. The big English in there says we're trying to minimize waste at the source, not just at the end of pipe. So people typically think that when you talk about cleaner production, it's about the end state, right? That production is ultimately about what you get at the end of the chain, and so that's where you should be thinking about the production. But we're saying not just at the end of the pipe treatment, right? Like at the throughout the life cycle of production, you've got to be thinking about clean processes. And then there's IE. We've got an IE expert. That's industrial energy efficiency. Again, it's reducing our energy consumption in a way that aids our industrial production. And then I've got sector examples in there. I'm sure you find your sector somewhere on there. So the last time we spoke about RECP extensively, we spoke about what cleaner production is extensively, and we spoke about IE. But why should we bother ourselves about clean production? Why should anybody care, right? Like, we can use our resources whatever way we like. But there are 4 reasons. The first one, I do not even have to come to Nigeria to hear about this one. The skyrocketing cost of diesel, electricity, raw materials, everything, right? So it makes sense that if you're a company that is thinking of profit maximization, you've got to find ways to try and cut costs, and because cost is rising now, it makes sense to use resources efficiently. The other one is because of environmental, and not just environmental, but just regulatory compliance generally, right? We've got regulators knocking on our doors every time, to say, guys, you've got to produce clean. And so that's one of the reasons why, RECP and IE is becoming increasingly important. Growing demand for greener supply chains from international suppliers. It's interesting that not just in Europe, but around the world, there are increasing regulations now about the emissions attaching to products generated outside of the EU, for example. So the EU has something called carbon border adjustment tax, I believe is what it's called. And it's essentially saying if you import anything into the EU and the emissions that is generated by that product is higher than the emissions you would have generated if you are producing in the EU, you've got to pay an adjustment tax. And so, as you can imagine, companies in the EU are looking for, producers and manufacturers outside of the EU that they buy from, that have cleaner production. They produce with very limited emissions generated. And so, to that end, if you are a company that produces things cleanly, chances are that you'll expand your value chain. And then finally, we've got people from Bank of Industry here. There are increasing grants and financial facilities that are specific to to green production, cleaner production, and that's an opportunity for us to drive down our cost of capital. So these 4 reasons are the top 4 among many for why keep RECP and IE is becoming increasingly important. On the right hand of the slide, the other important thing is all of us here seated in this room, we're responsible for 15% of Nigeria's energy use. And that's that we pulled from the IEA, so you can take it to the bank. And if we say that there's increasing pressure on our electricity generation and by extension, we've got to think about how to reduce our energy use. So there are 2 sides to this resource efficiency coin. Huge challenge with resource gaps, but on the other side of the coin, wherever there are gaps, chances are that there are opportunities. We've got 90 million people who do not even have access to electricity or are off-grid. 60 million people without pipe-on water. Remember, we said energy, raw materials, water, those are the resources that are important. And so look at these numbers, they're staggering. But even though these numbers are staggering, and there are clear indications that we are either not using our resources efficiently or that we do not even have access to the resources at all, what that means is, think about it. If we say there are 90 million people without access to electricity, there's one of 2 ways to solve that. We either go and fire up coal plants to get them the electricity, or we skip that, from that technology altogether into clean energy, so that the day we're bringing those people online, we're already bringing them onto clean energy. Do we get that? Like, the 90 million people, no access to electricity, we can either go and fire up diesel, fire up coal plants, do all those dirty energy, and ultimately leave that technology because we've got international funders knocking on our door, and still now go and do clean energy. Or we can simply say that, well, the way to bring these people hungry is to move them directly to clean energy. And so that chart, even though you might not see it properly, is talking about the available opportunities that are, financing opportunities that are there today. This case study is one that I particularly like. What I did was to take there's something called the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan. What that plan has done is to think about the entire, sectors that we have in Nigeria, and they said which ones are the highest emitting. They identified 5 sectors that are high emitting. In fact, these 5 sectors contribute 65% of our total emission. And what I did was to go and look at the top 5 banks in Nigeria, dug into their financial statements, went into the sectoral breakdown of their loans, meaning every bank would disclose these are the sectors that we give money to. And what I found was interesting. What I found was that the same sectors that we say are the highest emitting sectors are the same sectors that the banks are giving the most money to. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't give money to these sectors. I mean, this is an oil-based economy, so we cannot say don't give money to oil and gas companies. In fact, industrial companies are one of the top 5 sectors. We can't say they shouldn't give money to you folks. What we've got to start thinking, or at least our financial institutions have to start thinking about, is how do we rethink the credit system to ensure that when we deploy capital towards these industries, we are deploying it towards projects that will drive, or that will at least align with this emissions reduction. So we cannot have this fancy plan to reduce emissions, but we're still deploying capital towards the companies or the sectors that generate the most emissions. Saying that if you want to deploy capital towards those sectors, we've got to rethink how we give money to those sectors. So if an oil and gas company walks into the door and say they want to flare gas, they want to flare gas, or they want to, do a bit more oil mining, do we start asking questions around whether they've got carbon capture, CCUS on ground to ensure that the emissions are not going into the atmosphere? If any of the company here walks into the door, do we start prioritizing RECP related projects when we deploy capital? Is all I'm saying. So this is something that I find interesting. That there's still that mismatch between the way that we deploy capital and the plan that we have to reduce it. But it's not all bad, because I know that there are financial institutions here in the room. We have our financial institutions that are beginning to catch up. So I will try not to name. I've got the names of them. I was going to say I'll try not to name names, but there are few banks and companies that are beginning to now think actively about how to deploy capital towards, energy efficiency, resource efficiency, cleaner production. Axis Bank, for example, I believe the last time we were here, we were talking about the amount of bonds they've issued, even though the last one they issued was in 2022. FCMB has green loan product. Sterling has this thing called Earth Strategy, so it's HEART, and that Earth Strategy, is health, education, agriculture, renewable energy, and transport. The last time I checked, I believe it was 10 billion naira. But last time they announced that was 2022, so I don't know what the number is today. There isn't anything, out there. And of course, we've got government-backed agencies. So the CBN has, a ton of on-lending facilities. BOI has something called a solar energy fund, 6 billion naira. That's just one of many funds that that Bank of Industry has. DBN also has like some other on-lending facilities. But if you think about it, we're saying 6 billion naira, saying 5 billion naira, saying 10 billion naira for a 200 million people economy. So even though they're beginning to think about it, they're beginning to wake up to it, there's still a long way to go and there's a lot more to do. I don't know if any of you saw profits that the banks declared this year. I was tempted to leave Canada and come and collect job. Because I recalled that a couple of years back when I was auditing, when I was in PwC, I used to audit banks. The profits declared this year by one bank is what you get like 6 banks, and it was a good year. So if you have banks, declaring trillion naira profits, not just one bank, not just two banks. I'm excited about that on the one hand, but it means that there's capital that can be reinjected back into, businesses and companies like this. But I'm not here to argue with the bankers today. I'm on your side. Because the last time I was calling out bankers, they called me out very big training session. People stood up and said, "Oh, but we've got this facility." So you guys are here today. Raise your hand and tell us about the facilities you have, and not just tell us about it. Give the money to the people. I'm on your side. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm trying to speed through this so we get into the meat of the training itself. So what can banks do? How do we think about this entire ecosystem? And what can we do? At the company level, we've said there's resource constraints, whether due to the economy or those constraints due to climate-related issues. But there are also technology that is arising, right? We've got new technology out there that can help us efficiently use our resources. So there are two sides of the company. Resource constraints, technology that can solve the issue. For FIs, for financial institutions, well, if there are companies with these challenges, well, maybe that opens up an opportunity for them to build out more loan products and declare more trillion naira profits. And then at the systems level, we've got a ton of policies and regulations now that are out there. I spoke about the energy transition plan. There's the Rural Electrification Agency of Nigeria. Like, there are a host of regulation, of policies, of funds that are supposed to support and drive financial institutions to deploy capital into companies that need them. It's this system level approach that we've got to take, and not the Access Bankers 10 billion naira green bond today and Sterling has HEART tomorrow. Like, we've got to think about it at a system level, driven from up top, perhaps from the regulator, and that's what we're seeing, down to the financial institutions. Not just because climate change is there, and it's here, it's real. Not just because we need to we need to produce clean, but because there's an actual opportunity. There's an opportunity for the banks to make more and more money, and not FX gains. Okay, so how should FIs think about it? We said the last time that they've got to think about it from a portfolio level and from a credit risk assessment level. Credit risk assessment level was what I was talking about earlier, where you look at their books and you compare it to the plan that the government has, and there's a mismatch. So they've got to think about it, from both sides of the coin. We said for the companies have to think about what projects can we do, but also shouldn't take just a project approach to it. You should take a corporate strategy approach to solving the issue. So it's not just saying, let us switch off lights, but how does that tie into the overall corporate strategy of the company? And by the time you match the tactical angle of, the project will do, with the strategic angle of, here's how we fit into the overall vision of our company, what happens is that we're going to unlock capital, and our friends from BOI and from all the banks here will be happy to give us money. So where did we land the plane last year? We said that there are a ton of tools that we can use for RECP financing. It goes from very cheap. So if someone like Mr. Oladipo can say that he's so passionate about RECP, he sets up a grant, dash you the money, you get it at zero cost, you're excited. Or you can get something really expensive where Mr. Oladipo again can say, you know what, I'm going to actually invest in your company. The midpoint in there is loans. So whether those loans take the form of bonds or they take the form of corporate debt, which is what we're used to, or they take the form of project finance. I'll pause there for a second, see if we have any questions. I see people looking at me. I see I don't exactly follow you. So please pause. I'm going to pause. If you have questions, I'm going to take them. This was what we did 2 years ago. So if you have any questions at all, stop me. If not, we can keep going. Going on 3, 2.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Well done. Quite captivating.
Okay, so thank you. My name is Uche, and I want to follow up on what he said. And so earlier in the slide, we talked about context, and it's very important because we have to look at the evolution level of the society where we are. Personally, I don't think, sincerely, I don't think information is a problem. I think the problem is the focus. What the banks are very knowledge, when it comes to sustainability. They have reports rolling out every year. But the issue to me is their focus, the focus of what do they want to get out of the business. I don't think we've gotten to that societal evolution level where we are truly, genuinely caring for the environment, sincerely. And I think why I wanted to comment is that when you talked about the standalone projects, there's a reason. There was a study, and they came up, okay, if we cannot systematically drive, which is not possible. If you do that, you lose marginal market share because your peers are not doing the same. So that's why some of the banks, to promote their interest, now started coming up with dedicated packages to deal with, to make it look like, okay, we care, and this is what is showing that we care. But the business model still remains capitalist. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? I'll try to take both of them together. I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think the person that said that information challenge is wrong, but I also don't think that your point around taking a project approach because systems level, we're not there yet. So let me try and talk about information. The reason why trainings like this or platforms like this are great is for the exact reason you just mentioned, right? And before now, the approach is usually get companies together, talk to companies, get bankers together, talk to bankers, but they're in separate rooms, right? So I've been in trainings where we'll get bankers together and we'll discuss, hours and hours about how to structure products, how to create products for the companies. We walk out of the door and then go and do another training for the companies to talk about how to write a business plan, how to do X, Y, Z. What we're hoping to do with sessions like this, it's only the engineers that should come, or it's only the finance people that should come. We're saying everybody should come together in the same room, and we can speak through this. Like the theory, there isn't anything we're going to talk about today that is necessarily new. I personally think the biggest takeaway from sessions like this is the interactions we would have within the room between the people that can provide capital and the people that need capital, right? Because the trainings are great, they're important, but what's even more impactful is having people together in a room and having conversations around, for example, I can say everything, the companies can say everything they want, but if we can get across to the bankers, they can go back to their banks and say, yeah, well, because to be honest, the reason why banks have sustainability pots, like you said, sometimes it's not because they love the environment. Sometimes it's not even because they hate the environment. It's because of capitalism. So if you have a bank which is funded by, is everything okay? If you have a bank that's got someone that has provided capital, They're getting pressure from outside the country, international funders that have climate objectives, that have environmental goals. And so to keep the funders happy, they've got to create sustainability pots. That's on the one hand. The other thing is it's not all the fault of the banks, right? I sat with one of the biggest telecoms company in Nigeria, and they said, listen, we did a sustainability, we spoke to all our stakeholders to rank sustainability issues. Sustainability issues. Climate change was not on the list. Why? Because we're in a country where what people are thinking about is not emissions. That's just the truth, right? Yeah, right. We're in a country where this guy super sustain. This guy is the head of sustainability at one of the massive telecoms company. Made this comment at a conference we met at in New York at a global platform, saying, and he was on the stage, right? So think about a global platform. It was an ISSB platform. I don't know if there are accountants there in New York, and he was being truthful about it. He's like, guys, I really want to push this in my own company, but I've called all the stakeholders, from the equity providers to staff to the people that are buying the data, to everybody. We spoke to everybody. Please rank sustainability issues. Climate change didn't feature. But in New York, guess what? The major conversation we were having was about environmental challenges and climate change. Now, we won't dig into that today, but let me try. Am I allowed to speak with you? I can see we don't chop belly food. Okay, so let me get back to being the international expert. Right. But here's where we've got to balance it. The reason that we are not full does not mean that these environmental challenges will wait for us. That's where we've got to find the balance. The fact that we are dealing with, epileptic power supply and rising diesel cost and all of those, and we're saying we will not focus on cleaner production, the environmental challenges won't wait for us. They will compound, and guess what? If they do compound, the cost will keep going higher, and what would happen is that businesses will then start shutting down, or will skyrocket prices to a point where we just can't, people can't afford it, so there will be an affordability problem. But what happens to the company? It goes underwater, right? And a practical example is, even with this renewable, if I take renewable energy, for example, you consider hydropower renewable energy source, right? Well, it so happened that in a particular state, I believe it was in Connecticut, I can't remember, this utility company decided, we want to increase our renewable energy production. We will shut down a few of our coal plants and focus on hydrogen, solar, and have battery-backed, energy. Well, because of the increasing climate-related issues, there wasn't sufficient rainfall that year. And so, because there wasn't sufficient rainfall, there wasn't sufficient hydro energy generation, because there wasn't sufficient energy power generation, and there's consistent demand for energy. And this is in Nigeria, where you can say we rotate, there has to be power, there's got to be energy. What happened was that they had to go and fire up the coal plants again. The coal plants they had planned to decommission. So my point is, if we do not tackle these environmental issues head on and wait till such a time where we are properly industrialized, it won't wait for us, right? So the balance in the conversation is, you're right about information lag, because people would say that, well, we're not full yet. If you get meet management and say you want to convert from diesel to so, we look at you funny, and not only would they look at you funny, even if they understand, they'll say, who would fund this? Even if they can fund it, last time I checked, 30%, or where are the bankers? That's the cost of capital, right? So why would I take that to do renewable cleaner production? Right? We've got to be factual, So that's the challenge from an information perspective. But you're also right that there are capitalistic tendencies And so where is the balance in the conversation? The balance is what we've slightly touched on and we'll get deeper into, is that we've got to start framing these issues not as an environmental issue, but as a business issue. Once you can frame it as a business issue, and that's the challenge with not just RECP or IEE, any sustainability related issue, once you can frame it as not a values related issue, but a value related issue, you start having the years of capital provider. Final practical example. Our friend, the president in the United States, couldn't be bothered about sustainability. But guess what? Random, take a wild guess of the state in the US with the most renewable energy production. Wild guess. It's Texas. How can it be Texas? Texas is a deeply red state. The Republicans, they really could not be bothered about sustainable energy. In fact, they will say, we do not want it. Well, the reason why this deeply red state that cannot be bothered about renewable energy is where we've got the most renewable energy production in the United States is for one single reason. Texas has high solar and wind intensity. You go to a farmer and say, I want to buy your farmland and install solar panels here. He looks at the alternative. You go to a landowner and you say you want to install solar panels here. This is going to become a solar farm. He looks at the alternative. The alternative is to lease that land to a farmer that will not give him as much money. And so when it became dollars and cents, or naira and kobo, like we call it here, these guys are capitalists. Bring all the solar panels as much as you want here. I'll lease the land to you and make money. But they will go to the polls and vote against a climate bill. Why? Dollars and cents. The way to get anybody's attention is the environmental part is critical. That is what this is about. But if we keep framing it as an environmental issue, the only way we will get capital is to go and meet Mr. Olariko that wants to dash you money. But if you want to go and meet someone who's got limited resources, he's got capital, I've got $1 billion, I can put that $1 billion in FGN bonds and go to sleep without thinking about it. I can take that $1 billion and do a million things with it. So there are alternatives that I can use the $1 billion to do. You've got to compel me on why you're the one I should give the money to. And don't forget, capitalists are blind to everything, but have their eyes open to just one thing. It's profitability. So there's renewable energy and cleaner production, i.e., whatever EFC, every acronym you want to call it, there's that on the one hand, and then there is capital on the other hand. And we have to draw a bridge that will connect both of those. Until we build that bridge, we can do $1 billion trainings. Okay.
I have a suggestion for a bridge that can be built. I think all the items that you want to change, the audit would have brought that out. You check the cost, and then you can approach the bankers. You would have done your own review as well, cost benefit analysis. If I do this, how much is it going to save me in running my business? How much is it going to translate to in terms of profitability? So on one hand, it's helping your company. On the other hand, you have a business case that you can take to the bank and approach them. I want you to finance this for me, and this is a good meeting point. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. This man is already getting an A in this subject. He knows how to build the bridge already, engineer. We will get into how to build the bridge, and that's essentially what we'll be doing today. So you've gone about it from a tactical perspective. There is more the strategic perspective, which is, again, why should I bother about an energy audit? We've got to start framing it as we want to increase profit, for example. That can be the starting point of the conversation. We want to increase profit. We've looked at it today and we cannot increase prices, for example. We've increased price to a particular point. Maybe it's from the cost perspective that we can, increase our profitability and still keep our customers happy because we've not increased price, have not cut down the quality of the work of our product. And so if we say it's cost, there are no HR people here. The first thing we usually do when we say we want to gain efficiency is to let our people go. Moses, right? We would say that let's go and lay off staff, when in actual fact, if we will do the hard work of looking internally, we can keep our best hands and still find cost savings. That's my Oga at the top. He said you can even keep all of them and hire someone like me as well, to find a job in Nigeria. Canada is tough. So yeah, that's what we'll get into. So let's try and get into it now. All right. So how do we build? You set the proper layup. I hope that the other locations there's someone as fired up as you that will give me layup. I don't have to talk too much now. We already know anything to talk about. So now we've got to build the business case. Remember, if you do not take anything away from the training, please remember this. This shouldn't be purely about values. It should be about value. So how do we build the business case that will make, forget bankers for 1 second, let's be honest with ourselves, even management. Let's start by how do we even convince management to invest in this? And I know that there are CEOs here. How do you convince yourself if there's nobody that needs to convince you? How do you convince yourself that this is well worth it? What I've tried to do with this slide is to, if you remember when we were talking about the key drivers of RECP and IE, what I've tried to do with this slide is to bring those back up and say, how do we build a business case, and then provide examples to those. So if you remember, the first thing we said was, well, costs are rising, whether it's cost of diesel, cost of electricity, raw materials, whatever it is, cost of inputs and cost of resources are rising. So how do we build a business case? And I've touched on it, briefly. If a businessman, you go to that businessman and say, you know what, you do not need to scare off your customer with increased prices, but there's a way to drive off profitability, and that way is to lower your production costs. And the way to lower your production cost is, hold on a second, maybe we can start by doing an energy audit. If we do an energy audit, maybe it would reveal to us where the leakages are. If we can block those leakages, well, maybe our production cost will go down. If our production costs go down, maybe we would have improved margins. If we have improved margins, we've kept customers happy, prices constant, and I know we can't always keep prices constant. Prices constant, production cost lower, margins improved, and everybody smiles home happy. Right? We can even, based off this energy audit and the detailed work that we've done, we can walk up to the guys in BOI and say, because more often than not, let's refer to the bankers, we go to them and say, give me, 2 naira. And the banker says, okay, show me how or why I should give you the 2 naira. And we start scratching our head. So being able to provide evidence to them to say, hey, the reason I want to do this is because of X, Y, and Z. Here's the evidence of how I will get from point A to point B. They are more likely to provide capital to us. So from a cost perspective, the business case that is there is we can at least reduce cost. What's an example? So, and I know that people have heard this solar energy thing. I think it's overflogged, but let's use solar energy as an example. If you invest today, yes, some people are on Bande. I hope my hotel is not on Bande because maybe that's why the hotel price is expensive. Maybe they're on Bande, or maybe it's because there's diesel cost. Maybe if they have, installed solar panel now, they will not be charging someone like me that is broke all this money that they are charging me. But seriously, if The challenge with solar energy, for example, is the upfront capital investment that you've got to put into it. That's one of the challenges. The other challenge is, well, there's the challenge of intermittency. The engineers here, the sun doesn't shine all day long, and so at night, well, when there isn't solar power, there isn't the sun out, there is intermittent energy production, and as such, the cost of solar energy goes up because you then have to buy battery. That's the only reason why you need battery. You need battery for storage of the energy that you've captured already. The engineers here do not pretend to be an engineer, but you get the point. But imagine that we are able to do the mathematics of, if I invest 20 naira into a solar panel, once I install that and I've got appropriate battery storage, I don't have to talk to our friends from PhD again, to the extent that proper battery storage, or at least I don't have to talk to them for too long, or at least I don't have to buy as much diesel that I used to buy before. And so by the time you do the analysis into the future, you can tell that you're better off. Okay, we're spending too much time on this one. The other one is, there's pressure, there's always increasing pressure to meet regulatory compliance, right? And if you don't meet it, that's increased cost again, because you will pay fine, you will pay penalties. So imagine that there was some waste disposal, levy. There's some levy for improper disposal of waste, and you do proper waste management. Well, you not only meet the environmental regulation, you also avoid reputational risk. You don't want to be the company that is in the news for dumping water into river that people are using. And again, I'm trying to use more Nigerian examples. In the UK, for example, the main water company, it's called London Hydro, I think is what it's called. The sewage pipes were corroded and they did not, change it. Long story short, they are almost filing for bankruptcy now. The government is having to intervene because the investors pulled out. So you don't want to be that kind of company that gets called out for, reputational related issues. The third one, and I mentioned this, is this growing demand for greener supply. I gave us the example of the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism. Again, for those that were, that did not hear when I described it, there's now a carbon adjustment mechanism in the EU, in Europe, essentially, that says that if the product you're bringing into the EU generates more emission than the emission that it would have generated in the EU, a similar product in the EU, you'd have to pay a tax on the differential of the emissions. There's a lot of mathematics behind that. I won't bore you with that. But if you're a company that can match the emissions level of the EU, chances are that more European companies will come knocking at your door, and that's expanded market for you. And so beyond even lowering cost and improving margins through lower production costs, there's an opportunity to actually expand out your business base. The fourth one and final one is this access to green finance and the competitive advantage that provides to you. Imagine that you're able to get the grants and the on-lending facilities that BOI has. Rather than going to get 30% loan, you probably get it at, I think those on-lending facilities are early double digits, like 11%, 12%. You get a competitive advantage over, a competitor that doesn't have access to such, facility. And we're seeing increasing, especially in the international front, we're seeing increasing international donor interest in this space. And they're providing capital, not just directly to the companies alone, but also to the banks. And so the banks have an increased appetite now to fund projects like this because they want to talk to their, equity providers that they're running sustainable businesses. Again, please pause and stop me at any point if you've got questions or comments. I feel like this segment has stolen all the highlights of my slide. So how do we translate RECP and IE into business value? It's back to that thing. We have to learn. Like, please, if you don't take anything away from this session, please take this one away. We've got to learn how to start framing this project as profitability and resilience measures and not just environmental measures. We've got to learn that. There's no need for me to overflow that. We've spoken about it already. But beyond framing it, how do we appropriately frame it as a profitability measure? It's by quantifying the potential savings that we will get if we do the project, or the increased cost if we do not do the project. So it might not just be savings, it might be framing it as increased cost that you would have to expend if you do not do that project. So for example, you can say I've seen diesel costs go up by X percentage over the past 9 months. Based off what I'm reading in the news and based off the conversation today, here's the direction that I think that cost will go. In Nigeria, there's only the miracle of cost going up. There's no miracle of cost coming down. Except for what? Except for GSM. Except for GS. I don't have a comeback. There's only the miracle of cost going up. So it's an easy conversation to have. This particular thing that we're doing, the cost will continue to just go unidirectionally. Like it would only go one-way traffic. It would not come down. And so even if you're unable to quantify the savings, or at least not immediately, even if you imagine when let's go have the conversation and they say that, why should we do an energy audit? One easy way, one quick way to do it is, here's what the cost will continue to skyrocket into, even before we've done the energy audit. And then the final bit, because we should never lose sight of the environmental, angle as well, and the operational angle as well, is that we've got to think about the operational benefits. Sometimes it's not cost in terms of naira and kobo, it is cost in terms of the efficiencies that we get in our operations. So for example, we can say, if we install such and such, there will be lower downtime, or the quality of our product will be better, or there will be process consistency. Bringing these three things together will help to tie all the story together. So if you can say that, guys, this is about profitability, here are the potential savings or reduced costs that you get from this, and here are the operational angles and operational efficiencies that we'll find. If you can tie those three things together, it makes for a much more compelling story or a much more compelling argument, whether it's to management or it's to capital providers. Questions, comments? I'll keep going. I'm in between all of us and lunch, so I can take it slow, or we can find a balance between getting the message across and also still getting across it quickly. Some of us who were at the training the last time might have seen this slide, but I recall that we did this towards the tail end, and this is such an important framework. When you ask me, listen, I'm trying to put together an RECP project or an IE project or whatever project at all, actually, this framework I think is a great framework for getting the conversation not only started, but getting it to the finish line. So we've identified the gap. Let's say the gap is water wastage. Simple example. Or gaps, actually. We've identified gaps within our entire production line. Question 1 seems obvious, but you've got to ask yourself, do we want to do something about this? Or do we want to carry on doing what we currently do? And I promise you sometimes the answer is, if we do the cost benefit analysis, it might just make sense to keep doing what we're doing today. And so the first question, again, sounds very basic, but people often miss this step, is once you've identified the gap, a quick analysis to decide whether or not you want to do something about it or you don't want to do something about it. Doing something about it can be, how do we plug this water wastage? What solutions are out there? Is this something we can get across quickly? Is the technology available? Etc. etc. Once we move past and we've decided that we want to do something about the issue, the next thing is to say, what are the potential solutions? One example, we say energy cost has gone high, like diesel has gone high. The solution can be as simple as we'll start switching off, power, conserving energy. Yeah, I'm supposed to be in Canada. I'm supposed to be. We can start conserving energy. The solution can be as simple as that. Some other person can say, no, we would rethink our entire energy system and switch from diesel power generators into a renewable energy source. So most times, we often think that the solution is, it's got to be some grandiose, some super tech solution. It can be let's write down every single solution that is possible. Because again, sometimes we forget that cleaner production is a journey more often than not than a destination in and of itself. And here's what I mean. At some point, solar was the renewable energy source that everybody was crazy about. All of a sudden, we started talking about wind. Wind was what everybody was crazy about. Now we're talking about geothermal. From geothermal, we're talking about the reinvention of nuclear energy. From that, we're talking about distributed energy sources. So clean production or energy efficiency is not an end in and of itself. It's a journey that we would keep getting better at. It's why it's not out of place to write down the most mundane solution and then the most technical solution and go through that solution set. And how are we able to not only identify the solution but also go through the solution set? Is what we're doing today. We've got to engage the stakeholders internally. Finance will go and meet, the CFO will go and meet CEO. Oga, our cost has gone up by 50% month on month. The solution is to lay off the chief technical officer because his salary equals that 50% that has gone up month on month. Isn't that a joke? But I promise you, it happens every day in every single clime, meaning in every single geography that I've been privileged to be, that I've gone to. There are CFOs, the most educated people, who do not think big picture because it's easy to match CTO 50 million per month. Our increased cost 50 million per month. For the non-Yorubas, 2 bagay 4, right? And you say CTO, you see that guy that is the CTO's associate, who is 5 levels below him, is showing promise he can do the work that the CTO is doing. We will just brush him up a bit, and he will do the work. And so the problem that you think you've just solved, you should be the one in Canada. You know more English than me. You've just compounded the problem. And so what will now happen is that when you've compounded the problem, you now need a CTO again. But yesterday's price is not today's price. So the CTO that you were giving 50 million before, when you now go into the market, the one you will see is with beg. That person will now collect, he or she will now collect 80 million. With a beg, sir. And so, The problem has further compounded. What we will now do is to look at customers and say, well, if we cannot find efficiencies through cost, we will go and jack up what? Prices. And in this economy, where cost is increasing more than salary, people that were eating meat before, if you go and increase the price, will say, fish is not a bad idea. The people that could afford fish before, because the fishermen too, they've jacked up price, say egg is not a bad idea. The people that is egg that they could afford before, they'll say it's not a bad idea. You start saying words like, you know what, I'm getting older, I should start watching my height. All of that to say that it's important that we get stakeholders involved. You look at the cost and you even think that it's the CTO's salary that matches one-on-one. Is there a world where we call the CTO and we say that, well, we've looked at our cost base and it looks like your department, you will not even say it's the salary. You say that we've looked at it and it's your department that is the biggest driver of cost. Are there any opportunities? Are there any enhancement this is English class. Are there any enhancement opportunities and cost efficiencies that we can get from your team? Because if we get those cost efficiencies, the bonus pool for this year will be more. Remember what I was saying about framing issues as a profitability thing. It's not just company or even the CTO. Say the bonus pool will be higher if we can find cost efficiencies from your own team. And you know what? It's not only your team we are talking to all the other teams. So, but quality must not drop. That's the only thing that we have that must not drop. So how can we find efficiencies? By the way, we will take this a step further and say, here are the solution sets that we found. So finance will sit like this. The engineering team will sit like this. The oga at the top, nsddc.ww will sit like this. Everybody will sit at the table and have a conversation. And that's where that engaging stakeholders is important. Because sometimes, like I said, we think that the solution needs to be technical, and maybe it doesn't have to be as technical as we think. All right, let's be true. So, I've touched on the next step. We decided to do something, we've identified the solution set, we've engaged stakeholders. The next thing is to do not only a quantitative analysis, and this is important because sometimes we distill it down to naira and kobo, but there is also qualitative analysis that we've got to do. Okay, this thing is easier and cheaper if we bring it from, such and such part of the country. But it looks like there are X-men along that route. So even though it's cheaper, is it cheaper only from a naira and kobo perspective, or is it expensive on the lives of our people? So what risks are involved from a qualitative perspective, not just from a naira and kobo? And the only way we can do that, I can't drive this home enough, is ensuring that the person that is thinking about money, and the person that is thinking about risk, and the person that is thinking about technical solution is in the room. It's not the finance person's fault that they are always thinking about money. It's not the engineer's fault that they always see a solution from a technical perspective. It's not the corporate strategist's fault that they always think about issues from a strategic perspective. It's not, I used to hate internal audit. It's not the internal audit and risk management people. And I promise you, I used to be an auditor until I've jumped to the other side. And now when auditors come to me, I'm like, I'm on, I get wahala. And side story, my auditors today are PwC people, and I used to be a PwC person. So one day I sat down and I said, is this how people used to look at me when I was auditing? I don't think so. Me, I was a kind auditor. No, you can see, you can be a kind auditor and still find ways of getting to the solution by saying, you know, you are the one that knows this work. Can you just explain your process to me? They will now explain that process. You say, it looks like you missed. Can you give me one example file? You are the perfect person. They will now give me the sample. I will not say, I'm sure you did not make a mistake, but it looks like this point B that you described to me before. I think someone might have missed it. So what will we call it? We'll say, well, for next year, this is an enhancement opportunity. And so that's how, because the other way is to say you did not do your job, blah, 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 in the report. Did I include that thing in the report or not? I still included it, but I've packaged you as, you know your work, I don't know your work like you, because auditors would always come into the room and act like, guys, cheat code. Auditors don't know the thing you are doing as much as you know it. Take it from me. I used to be an auditor before. Now that I'm on the other side, like I said, I'm like, come on. It be like I don't get sense that time. All right, guys, back to the class. So look at the quantitative and qualitative, make a quantitative and qualitative assessment of each solution. And then the next thing, and very important thing, and we'll get to it in a second, is to rank the solutions. Which one is the most feasible? Based off all this analysis that we've done, can we rank them? The reason we are ranking them is not necessarily to even throw the others away. Remember, cleaner production is a journey. We can decide that, well, given the cost limitations we have today, you know what we'll do? We'll start by conserving energy by shutting off, power at 7 p.m. That's what we'll do. And then, 6 months down the line, here's the other thing we'll do. And then, but please, let's rank the solutions and not just throw away the solution. And then we get to the exciting part where bankers love, where finance people love. Well, guys, okay, you've spoken all this English and all of that. When it comes down to it, it is. Yeah. So, where will this money come from? Will it come from an internal source? Because, like banks, we declared 1 trillion naira this year. Some of you people are even declaring more than the banks. Maybe that's why they are not giving you money. Maybe we've declared a lot of money, and this is the year where we made so much money, rather than, just keeping it in retained earnings. And I apologize if I'm using, if you don't understand what that term is. I'm just saying the profit you're saving it and not giving it back to, the capital providers. Are we going to save it in retained, rather than saving it in retained earnings? Maybe this is the year that we made a bit of money, and we should just do the project this year, or using the money that we have internally, or are we going to go to, externally? And by externally, it doesn't have to be the banks. Like, this is where the finance folks can then come in to say, again, things that are available, which one is cheap, which one is affordable, is there even one that is targeted at this particular project, not just our industry? Because sometimes we make the mistake of saying, there is this grant that is for textile companies, but there might be a grant that is available for renewable energy. It really doesn't matter whether you're a textile company or a wood and wood product company. The reverse is also the case. Sometimes we chase renewable energy projects where everybody's chasing after it, even though there is a tailored grant for your own industry, right? And that increases, the likelihood or the chance of you getting that grant or loan at a subsidized price. All right. So when we then decide, is it internal, is it external? If it's external, is it debt, is it equity, is it both? And all of this is what we put together and then present ultimately to both management and external funding. Sorry, someone did time check my structure has gone up. Okay. Let's keep going. All right. Looks like the same slide, but there's now dotted line. This is what people that do slides do. Why can't you explain the same thing inside the other slide? By the way, I created the slide, so I'm shading myself. All right, so that box right there is what we've termed the opportunity matrix. It brought me from Canada. I have English on this slide. I'm sorry. What this is just saying is that this is perhaps one of the most important parts that will solidify our case for funding. This part of deciding what solutions are there, doing the analysis of quantitative and qualitative analysis, and then ranking the solutions that are most feasible and deciding on the one to go with. That's where the opportunity truly lies. Because if we can get this right, writing a business plan can be as easy, and I permit me to use the word easy, as just engaging a consultant to write it for you. Or it can be as easy as writing it internally. But I promise you, if you go to a consultant without truly knowing what you want, the consultant will write their own plan, not your own plan for you. The consultant will write what? They will write their own plan. How do I know this? I've been a consultant before. And not me, I've seen other consultants write their own plan and not the company's plan. Or what they think your plan should be. Because how will they prove to you that the 50 million naira that they've charged you is important? The big fours, I'm out for them today because I'm out of PwC, so I can shade the accounting firms. When you give them a project, or when you give us a project, what we'll do is, they've charged you what? 500 million naira for an audit. Banks, the charges are as high as that. How can I collect 500 million naira from you and then now give you 6 pages back? Even you'll be like, this 6 pages for 500 million. So, what about if it is 120 pages? Even though the point ultimately can be distilled into 6 pages, and I promise you they do the hard work of all the research. I used to go to work Saturday, Sunday, they do the work. But my point is, the person that needs the document, what they need, you can write it in 6 pages. But all of you here too, if I come after collecting 500 million naira from you, and I give you, this man's book is big, and I give you this, and I say, here's the solution for 500 million. You say, give me change. So what I'll do is I'll do 100 pages, and I'll say that executive summary is in front. That's one. Number 2, I will tell you that, we have to fly around, and there are certain costs that we did not factor into that 500 million initially. And what I will say is that I'll go and look for one English. Reimbursable is easy, you can catch me. I'll say it is cost overruns. So before you go and check dictionary for what cost overruns is, you would have credited me. And then when you now start reading that document, you now come back and say, actually, we need an implementation plan, because this document of 100 pages, we don't know where to start. So what do? I'll say, because I wrote the plan, I will give you a discount. And so I will not charge you 500 million this time, because I wrote the plan. How much should I charge you? I will charge you 250 and say it's a flat fee. This time there will be no cost overruns. you might just pay reimbursable. And so, because you too, you like the person that will wear fancy suits and speak plenty English, you will not trust your people that are internal, that have been doing the work for a long time. And I have no issues with, with consultants. I'm a consultant myself. But I'm just saying that this is where that sitting down and deciding which one do we need consultant, because there's certain things that are technical that we need external people for. Or what are the things that we actually don't need a consultant for? Or maybe the problem is threefold and we actually only need the consultant for step 3B. Step 1, 2, and 3, and 3A, we can do ourselves. And I promise you, the consultant will tell you, no, you guys will not, you guys, in fact, if you give them the 1, 2, 3, they will say, we found enhancement opportunities. So apart from value and values, you should take home enhancement opportunities. When you go and tell your CEO that one, they will say, this person knows what they are saying, and then they will approve the RECP project you want. All right, let's speed through. So, practically, how can we do, what does this opportunity matrix look like? It's essentially, once we identify RECP and IE opportunities, what we will do is to say, what's the cost? What's the impact? How easy is it to implement? Let me take that again. What's the cost? What's the impact? How easy is it to implement? And so I've got this, example on the board where we've got all these measures on the board, right? On the screen, I beg your pardon. Well, let's replace bulbs. Let's fix compressed air leaks. Should we switch from diesel to gas-fired boiler? Should we upgrade to energy-efficient motors? Should we install waste heat recovery units? And what I've tried to do is to say, if you think about it, replacing bulb, the cost is low. Maybe the impact on energy efficiency ranks between what? Low and medium. So that's easy to do. You can tick that box quickly. But if you want to install an entire waste heat recovery unit, the cost is high, the impact is actually high. Or more Barakudi today, right? Like we don't have as much money today. And so the priority for this particular list might be medium. Do we understand that? So it's essentially looking at cost, impact, ease of implementation. Now, know that when you're in class, there are people that will be answering the question, that will make the facilitator think that everybody in class is following, even though some people, they are sleeping. So what do? We'll do test. So what I've done so that we can drive this home is, there is this mid-sized juice bottling plant in Ogun State. What's your name, sir? There's Babatunde Bottling Company in Songwater. Does that man look like Mr.? No, that guy looks like me more than Mr. Babatunde. Here are the RECP measures that are, that Babatunde and Co is considering. Can we think, and I'll give us like 5 minutes, think through which one is going to be the cheapest? Which one do you think is going to have the most impact? No. I'm going to point at someone that I think is not listening. So I just, take a look at it and we can think about this together. By the way, I'm one of those people that do not think that my answer is absolutely correct. So we can talk about the answer that we put on the board. that. Can you imagine? This man thinks the way to convince me is by telling me I have phobia for mic. You will not use mic.
Come outside. Please come outside.
Please come outside. Please, is there any volunteer? Like, let's just chat through this. What do you think is the cheapest? Okay, so someone thinks. Thank you, sir. What's your name, sir? Please.
Okay, my name is Engineer Ajibade.
We are ready for this.
Okay, so maybe starting with cost. You want me to do cost separately, impact separately, or E separately?
No, yes. Even you have forgotten question.
Okay, from my own assessment, starting with cost, I think LED retrofits will have the least cost, followed by switching from diesel to gas-fired boiler, followed by compressed air system repairs, and lastly, heat recovery from pressurized units. That's my own assessment.
Thank you, sir. Someone registered their displeasure. But let's go to the other extreme. Let's go to the extreme end.
Good day, everyone. It's okay. According to my own assessment, the first one should be compressed air system leakage repairs. The second should be LED retrofits in packaging area. The third one should be heat recovery from pasteurization units. Then lastly, switch from diesel to gas-fired boiler.
Can we clap for these people? We are not. Can we get one more person? And I like not only diversity, but I like inclusion as well. So, can we get a lady, please, if you don't mind? Please. You are from Lagos Business School, right? Yes. Yes.
For the first one,
Sorry, guys. Yes, Lagos Business School. Yeah, that's added pressure.
okay, so for the first one, LED retrofit in packaging area, we have the cost will be low, and then the impact on efficiency is medium, and the parity will be high. Then, from what you taught us, okay. Then for the compressed air system leak repairs, yes, compressed air system. So the cost leak system, the cost will be low, the impact on efficiency will be high, and parity will be high. Then for the heat recovery from pasteurization unit, well, I think the cost will be medium. I think the cost will be medium, the impact will be high, and then the parity will be high. Then for the switch from diesel to gas-fired boiler, the cost will be medium, the impact will be something. The cost will be medium, the impact will be high, and then the parity will be high.
Please, a round of applause.
Thank you.
Can I ask one follow-on question? Where did you get the price for any of this? Guys, one class. I just posed a question to the class. Where did we get the price for any of this? Or how did we assume, how easy?
If you are coming from a heavy industry where compressed air is used heavily and you burn so much diesel, those will form your heaviest cost. So really there are no hard and fast rule about it.
Thank you.
Okay, it's also important to mention that for the LED lights, the cost is not just the cost of buying them and replacing. You have to also consider the cost of evacuating the used lights, which is very, very high by the time, because it's hazardous waste. So you have to evacuate them and pay. And then for some of them, like the compressed gas is already in the system, so you are optimizing and then the heat from pasteurization will be generated anyway, so you are actually just taking advantage. So we have to factor that. Thank you.
Thank you. You see, I was serious when I said there are no right or wrong answers. The point I was trying to make with this exercise is what we've just discussed now, which is that we need everybody in the room to come together to have conversations about, because cost might be easy, and by cost I mean financial cost can be easy to assess, but how do you truly measure impact? How do you truly measure, because my view on impact might be different from your view of impact and what's even most impactful, right? And so I'm going to put up an answer, but I want you to take that answer with a pinch of salt. The point is that on the face of it, yeah, the LED is the cheapest, right? But it's to the extent that we've not thought about disposal cost. What's the disposal cost, but not just disposal cost from a naira and kobo perspective, but also from the potential environmental hazard that it poses. I'm sure you guys have probably heard of carbon tax. Like, it's almost, if we were able to put a tax on the carbon that we emit and all of those, how much does it truly come down to? And I promise you that number ranges vastly depending on who is doing the calculation. In South Africa, carbon tax is $15, I think. In China, it's $300. Like, so it really comes down to, even with cost, how do you truly measure cost, right? Which is why I always move away from just tactics. Tactics say, let's do LED retrofit. Strategy says, what are we trying to achieve? Let's start from the big picture. If energy efficiency, for example, is what we're trying to achieve, what solutions are there? How do we rank them? And how do we debate amongst ourselves around impact and the rest, and ultimately reaches an answer that at least ties into our strategy? So yeah, someone says, one answer says, LED is easy, it's low cost, easily implemented. Someone said that, well, it was because, and so you would notice that the answers there do not even just focus on cost. For some, it talks about, ease of implementation. For some, it talks about impact. Like, hey, listen, for this compressed air system, it was actually an audit that unfolded this, and it saves energy. It just talks about impact. It doesn't talk about the cost. The point here is there's a need for that conversation, and that conversation might not just be the naira and the kobo. It might be more qualitative than we think, and we should be happy to debate amongst ourselves. I'm happy that we had different views, because there are some people that would say that it really depends on the geography that you're talking about. Like, the price of, in Nigeria now, the price of fuel in one state is different from price of fuel in another state. As if fuel, let me pronounce it properly, as if fuel is, Anyway. Okay. There's something else. So we spoke about the opportunity matrix. Like I like matrix for this course. There's something called a cost impact matrix, and it's essentially just another way, right? Like another way of looking at this to say, can we put this on a 2x2 matrix and think about things from just a cost and impact perspective? So you put high impact up there, low impact, and this is a practical way actually of dealing with this. So we've got all these solutions. When I say let's talk about it, an easy way to actually within a conference room, within 5 people, is to draw this 2x2 matrix, put high impact up there, put low impact, high cost, low cost, and let's debate and have conversations, practical conversations on where we should be placing things. I promise you I've moved things around at least 3 times before this class. I said, no, but I don't think so. Switch from diesel generator to gas was somewhere else before. So I like that I am debating on, what's truly impactful, what's high, what's low. So this 2x2 matrix is another way to think through, doing an assessment or a prioritization framework of what do we truly think is the most important. Don't forget, we're still talking about developing a business case. We haven't even spoken about building a business plan. This is the business case, and they go hand in hand. But the business plan now has an architecture for how you write it. This comes first, that comes first. But this is what I'll call the foundation. This is the foundation of your business planning. Because like I said, you can tell a consultant to do the actual writing. This part, please don't outsource as much as possible. Like ensure that you truly know why whatever solution or whatever project you're about to embark on is important, but not just important, how it fits into your ultimate company strategy. Some people are sleeping again. So, and because we say this thing is practical, we will do a 2x2 in this class. In this case, it's not everybody will draw their 2x2 matrix like this, and we'll go table to table and select one person that will talk about what their own 2x2 matrix is. My friend in suit, I'm sorry, what's your name? Yomi. Okay. So Yomi owns a local bakery. Sorry, what? Yomi owns a bakery. Bankers, they have money. They are the ones declaring. Sterling did not declare 1 trillion. They declared a couple 100 billions. So Yomi got money out of that couple 100 billion. That's why his suit is sharp. All right. So what we're going to do is look at this bakery. This bakery is in Enugu State. Am I pronouncing that correctly? And they've got all of these as potential RECP/IAE options for them. What we'll do is to draw a 2x2 matrix, high impact, low impact, high cost, low cost, and try to place each one of these. And don't worry, this is not a trick question. And we've established the fact that we will debate on what has the most impact or not. So we've made that point. But I'm saying, when you walk into the meeting, imagine that you were a member of the executive committee or whatever of this bakery. Do bakeries even have executive committees? Anyways, you're a staff in the bakery, and you guys want to have a conversation around these options. Where would you place what? And it's fine to make assumptions on cost and income. I'm sorry. All right, so I'll give you, let's see, 5 minutes. 10 minutes. let me remind us of where we're coming from. When we started this morning, we spoke about, we did a refresher of what happened the last time. We spoke about, we set the foundation of what what resource efficiency and cleaner production is. When we moved past definitions, we talked about the key drivers of RECP and IE. After we spoke about the key drivers, we moved on from there. And we started talking about the challenges that, the financing challenges that are there. We put up a chart actually, and we said, well, banks are deploying capital in one direction, and they're deploying capital to the highest emitting companies or industries actually. And then we said that we've got to take a strategic approach towards the way that we're approaching RECP and IE, that it cannot be done in silos, and that we should, in fact, ensure that we take a better view to it, and we should take a system thinking to it. I think it was at that point that the conversation became more interesting when people started giving their views. Someone said it was information related. Another person said it was banks have capitalistic tendencies, no shade to Sterling Bank or any other bank that is inside this place, or people that have even marketed. No shade to them today. Even though that's the table that said we will get there. So, after we spoke about that, we then spoke about the different financing tools that are available. We said that it can either be as cheap as grants, or that it can be as expensive as equity. We were done with that, session, and then we moved on to the other session, and we spoke about how to build a business case. We started out by talking about the key drivers, and we mapped it against, the benefits that those key drivers can give us, and we provided example. One of those examples was this carbon border adjustment that we spoke about. We also spoke about how, we should always bear in mind values, but value is more important. And then that was where we then got into talking about actually building the business case. We spoke about a prioritization framework. We said, you should identify a gap. When you identify a gap, you can either decide to do nothing or do something. If you do something, you should identify what solution set is available, talk to key stakeholders. Once you talk to key stakeholders, do a quantitative and qualitative assessment. Once you do a qualitative and quantitative assessment, that you should do risk assessment as well. We said that when you do this risk assessment, you should not think only about financial costs, but you should think, about the cost structure holistically. And then after that, we got into the world of matrices, right? We spoke about the opportunity matrix, and we spoke about, thinking cost, impact, and ease of implementation. Thank you. And after we spoke about that, we broke off into different groups, and we decided to start, practicalizing this. And we did a class exercise where people came up in arms, and they decided that, their way was the better way of, of doing things, even though nobody gave, actual financial costs to this. And so what we quickly learned is that there will be some degree of tension when you try to prioritize RECP and IE solutions. From there, we moved into the 2x2 matrix. And when we got into the 2x2 matrix, that for me has been the most fun part, because there was one group that was doing the assignment that we did not give. There was another group that was so creative. They said high and low isn't great enough. We should have medium. And what they even did was to put the medium and said, we are so creative, we will call the medium as whatever we put on the dotted lines. And then when we were done with that, people started getting hungry. And the hungrier they got, they became angry. And so we decided that we would go for a break. But before we went for break, we then paused and we went through additional slides. The additional slides we went through were questions that you should ask, right? We said, sample questions. We said the questions can either be, from problem statement to the business case itself. And then finally, we said that you should think about the cost before you deploy a project, and you should think about the cost after you deploy a project. And then when we were done with all of that, we said we were going to go for a 10-minute break. But people were hungry and angry. So we brought in rice, which I thought was what everybody would have. but as I look into the room, people are sleeping. And that's how we got here. Did I miss out anything?
Not at all.
All right, great. So let's get into how to prepare a business plan. I think this is the easiest part, but it's also the part that bridges the gap between making a business case and landing funding. And like I said, there were three things that got me excited when I started this. There were people who could answer our business planning question. You know, we had people from LBS who answered fantastically the questions that we posed. But then the other thing I said is that we have bankers in the room, right? And so those bankers can, you know, correct us if in fact the business plan framework that we're going to talk through now is right or wrong. All right. With this few points of mine, I hope I've been able to convey and not to confuse you, but I remember everything that we've done today. All right, so let's move forward. So why is a business plan important? Again, I'll try not to speak too many English. After you've made your business case, it's important that you have a document that articulates this business case, articulates your strategy, and it is done in a systematic manner. Now, that document is called a business plan. All of us have heard of a business plan before, but I think four things really drives home the point. First is that you are just able to clarify your vision. One of the things we've noted through this training and we've learned as well is sometimes we jump into projects, we take a project and a tactical based approach rather than a strategic approach, and so it becomes difficult for us to really land the plane. And by landing the plane, I mean getting the funding that we want, or even just convincing management internally that, you know, one direction or the other is where we should go. A business plan helps to clarify and articulate that vision that you have. And much more than that, it's not just clarifying the vision, it's clarifying it in a way that folks like our Sterling Bank friend would understand. We'll clarify it in a language that the funders are used to, and so it's just easy for them to check that their boxes to say, hey, is this there, is that there, is this not there? The other thing is, some people think about a business plan without really thinking about its ability to drive implementation, right? You talk about the problem, but do not talk about an implementation plan. A properly written business plan would guide implementation, right? We would not only say that here's the problem, we would not only say here's the solution, we will say that such and such time is when we would solve this problem across this solution set, and this is the person that is responsible for it. So a business plan, a well-written business plan, doesn't just clarify your values, it also helps to guide the implementation of the solution that you've deployed or you intend to deploy. And of course, naturally, it follows that it helps to unlock financing. You just don't knock on, you know, my very great friend's door to demand for funding. You'd want something that articulates your strategy, and that's the other thing that the business plan does. And then finally, it just connects the dots, right? It shows not only how your plan or how an RECP project. When I talk about the business plan, yeah, I'm talking about in the context of an IEE/RECP business plan. So I'm talking more like almost like a project plan, right? It helps to articulate not only the sustainability of the plan, competitiveness, but also how it complies. Again, you want to bear in mind those four key drivers that we spoke about. All right, so what are the, and as I look at this now, I see that the font actually is small, so I apologize for that. Because even I from this place, I almost lost it. But I'll read it out loud. The first thing you would notice if you take a look at this is that even though this is going from left to right, executive summary looks like the last thing on that program. I thought we would typically start anything with executive summary. In fact, we've spoken about how consultants will write 600-page, 120-page documents, but then put executive summary in front. But why is executive summary at the end in this situation? Well, if you really think about it, what are you summarizing if you haven't written anything? I find it interesting that people would write a plan and they start with an executive summary. Because you are almost seeing the end from the beginning. It's not clear. I'm sorry, can someone else turn off the lights in the building? Again, I deeply apologize for this. I'll try to ensure that on the next location the fonts are bigger. I'm really sorry about this. Yes, so we were talking about how people summarize stuff that they've not written. And so again, it sounds really small, it sounds almost insignificant, but it's really important that you've done the groundwork before you write a summary. Is that clear?
Right.
All right, so what then do we start with? Well, what we should be starting with is the problem that we've identified or the opportunity that we've identified. After we've spoken about the problem, and we'll do a deep dive into all of these now. Well, if it's a problem, we talk about the solution. If it's an opportunity, we try to expand on what that opportunity is and how we intend to approach that opportunity. And after that, we look into, well, what's happening in the market. By the market, we're talking, what does the industry say? How is the industry approaching this? Are there regulatory barriers to this solution we want to deploy? Are there permits that we need to get, for this solution that we intend to deploy? And what's just the market context altogether? Is this an unproven technology? Is this a proven technology? Are there cheaper options? Are there different manufacturers? And then after that, we get into implementation plan. This one is interesting. It's as interesting as the executive summary one I just said. People write implementation plan without timelines. I've never, we will just list out bullet points. Who is going to be responsible? At what point? What are the metrics? Yeah, I've seen interesting plans, and I've lost count of the number of business plans that I've reviewed or written in this my very short life. And so I've seen implementation plans that are not even bullet points of nothingness. And then after that, obviously, we get into the KUDI part, right? What's the financial strategy? You would remember during our prioritization framework that we said financial strategy, and you'd notice that I said strategy and not financial metrics. Because people often think that when you get to the financial part, what you should be immediately writing there is balance sheet, income statement, and your cash flow. And I put it to you that would be nothing more than an Excel exercise if it is not well thought out. I've seen income statements that do not align to the business plan. So I'll give you an example. In the business plan, you probably say we would recruit 10 people, for example. You go to the financial plan, and on the income statement, there's probably no staff at all. You can tell that there is a disconnect between the person that did the qualitative part of the writing and the person that built the model. It's one of those things where you just say to finance, or that finance, how far? We don't write plan. It's just disjointed. I see this too many times. Like you see a properly written plan and you get to the financial part and there's just no connection. And so what's important to note here is that it's carefully worded as a financial strategy, meaning that we're not just talking metrics, we're talking about how we're going to fundraise. We're talking about the options that are available for the fundraising. And when we talk about the metrics, we tie it directly to the plan that we have written. So that when this my organ collects your business plan that you've written, you would actually deploy the cash that is promised in this training. Else, if you give him a plan, okay, maybe send it back money. If you give him a plan that is not well articulated, that is disjointed, he looks like a nice person, so most likely he will point out the errors to you and tell you to go and fix it. I've seen some bankers that are not as nice looking as he is. I don't know whether you're nice. I just know that you're nice looking. So I've seen some. This is low cost, high impact. All right, so let's talk about flawed financial strategy. It has to go beyond just metrics. Let me see if I remember my slides. And so after financial strategy, we get into risk. We have to talk about risks that are present. Are they technical risks? Are they operational risks? What sort of risks do we have? I've got to articulate those and articulate it properly. After we've done all of those, there's an element, even though we've said this should not be values driven, it should also be value driven. Sometimes we then leave the values part of it outside of the plan altogether. You're writing an RECP related plan and you do not talk about the sustainability impact. That's almost dead on arrival, if you get what I mean. That even though you've written a great plan, you should be able to, tell us how this ties back into the environmental or the broader sustainability impact that you're dealing with. For example, you gave us a great example of how we can say LED lighting stops are just changing bulbs, but how have we thought about end of life disposal? We should also try to articulate that. That makes for a comprehensive and well thought out and well articulated plan. All right, so let's go into the slides one after the other. Let's start with problem. The problem should have three elements. Let's talk about the problem slide. So for the problem statement, there are three key elements to it. On the one hand, you want to talk about what the challenge is. That's almost obvious. You want to talk about what the challenge is. Number two is that you want to quantify the impact. The third element, which is eluding me now, but I promise you I'll remember in a second, is that you want to, let me check I'll be done by 4. So first thing, define what the operational challenge is, right? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Is it excessive water use, for example? Is it high energy usage? Or is it high energy bill? Are there process inefficiencies? The second element, and I got that as well, is the cost or the risk, right? Like you want to talk about what the cost is or risk of maintaining the status quo. You remember that we spoke about this, that sometimes we think that this stops at just saying, yes, the savings that we're getting, but in actual fact, we can flip it on its head and say, yes, the costs that we're going to be saving. And then the third part is outlining the opportunity for savings, compliance, or reputational benefit. So I've given an example.
Very interesting, things. Just to set the scene, the training is about business planning and corporate strategy. And the reason why we brought everybody input for every part of an organization. People often think that it's the folks in strategy that should write a business plan, or the folks in accounting that should prepare the financial model, but it's not actually true. The best plans that I've seen are those that were thoughtfully articulated, right, that touches every single part of the organization. Let's see, does this work? Great. So what's the agenda for today? Quickly. We've got 2 days. Day 1, we'll try to go through all the theoretical parts. So we'll set the context. I know there are people here who were not here the last time that I came around. So we'll start by a quick refresher of what we learned the last time, which will set the foundation for the things we'll be learning today. We'll talk about how to build a business case for RECP and IEE projects. And then we'll do an introduction into how to write bankable plans. Tomorrow is the one I'm most excited for because right in this room we'll get into groups and we'll try to practicalize what we learned. Too many times you go for trainings and people will just come and dump things, and you walk away and you feel like, well, by the time you go through the traffic in Obakran, you've forgotten what you learned. But tomorrow we will sit together and everything that we learned today we'll try to practicalize it. In fact, I suspect that we'll get ourselves into small groups and maybe we'll even have a competition and see who wins, who carries the day.
So now, I think there is a little bit of gap in terms of, you mentioned system driven, and that's where I want to come. There's a bit of gap in terms of information. Information is not going around. All the industries and companies that need this, I'm sure they want to buy, how they buy into it. But there is very, very little information out there. So I think there should be a campaign in the area of information dissemination, right? The banks are available to fund because that's the business of lending. The information is not there for the companies to come out and access these facilities and funds. Thank you.
About context, and it's very important because we have to look at the evolution level of the society where we are. Personally, I don't think, sincerely, I don't think information is the problem. I think the problem is the focus. What the banks are very knowledgeable, when it comes to sustainability. They have reports rolling out every year. But the issue to me is their focus. The focus of what do they want to get out of the business. I don't think we've gotten to that societal evolution level where we are truly genuinely caring for the environment, since then. And I think why I wanted to comment is that when you talked about the standalone projects, there's a reason. There was a study and it came up, okay, if we cannot systematically drive, which is not possible. If you do that, you will lose marginal market share because your peers are not doing the same.
And so to keep the funders happy, they've got to create sustainability pots. That's what we want to. The other thing is it's not also the fault of the banks, right? I sat with one of the biggest telecoms companies in Nigeria, and they said, listen, we need a sustainability. We spoke to all our stakeholders, but I've called all the stakeholders, from the equity providers to staff to the people that are buying data, to everybody. We spoke to everybody. Please rank sustainability issues, climate changing future. But in New York, guess what? The major conversation we trigger cleaner production. Right? We've got to be factual, So the alternative is to lease that land to a farmer that will not give him as much money. And so when it became dollars and cents, the sun doesn't shine all day long, and so at night, well, when that you've captured already, the engineers there do not pretend to increase costs again because you will pay fine, you will pay penalty. So imagine dumping water into river that people are using. They are almost filing for bankruptcy now. The government is having to intervene because the investors pulled out. So you don't want to be that kind of company that gets called out for. There's now a carbon adjustment mechanism in the EU, in Europe, essentially, that says that of the environmental angle as well and the operational angle as well, is that we've got to think about the operational benefits. Sometimes it's not cost in terms of naira and kobo, it is cost in terms of the efficiencies that we get in our operations. So for example, we can say, if we install such and such, there will be lower downtime, or the quality of our product will be better, or there will be process consistency. Bringing these three things together will help to tie all the story together. So you can say story, or a much more compelling argument, whether it's to management or that are most feasible and deciding on the one to go with. That's where the opportunity truly lies. They will write their own plan. How do I know this? I've been a consultant before. And not me, I've seen other consultants write their own plan and not the company.
What do you think about me? What do you think about the fork? Guys, please, let's listen to it. So that's switching off idle mixers and conveyor belts. Did you say high cost, high impact? So go on. I was just messing with you.
High impact.
Low cost, high impact.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Is there any table
That is high costs and high impact.
so
High cost.
high cost
And
high
high
impact? Is there any table at all? So you it's medium cost, even though medium is not on the 2x2 matrix. Because they said you cannot have just high and low. There has to be medium somewhere. And the way that they framed medium is to put it on the line. So that's like goal line technology. Okay. So it's high cost and high impact. Do we have any other table that thinks insulating hot water pipes?
Yes.
This table they are just supporting.
They're going to insulate the entire line.
Everybody. I like that table.
Network.
You know, some people think it's not. I mean, how much can it possibly cost to insulate? That's what some people think. Okay.
It's going to be the entire.
He's saying he disagrees with you. What do you mean? How can you say it's local? That's what he's saying. He's saying you can't be right.
It's not just 10 liters for the entire hotel. I mean,
It's a bakery.
okay.
It's a bakery. Is it the entire hotel?
Okay. Yeah, the cost might be low.
Guys, you know why I like this class? There are people that are doing overseas. Guys, please, one house, please, guys, please. Sorry, decorum. The people who decided 2x2 matrix is not enough. The people that are doing their own. Exactly. So for them, they decided bakeries. Why should we be doing bakery when we can solve the problem of the place that we are right now? I mean, why bakery? Like, we can solve hotels' problem. And you know what? He was even dramatic about it. He was like the entire. All right, so this table, you know the interesting thing about this table? They're in front of me, so it feels like they are engaging. Do you understand? But let's see whether it is high impact table. So, please, solar hybrid system. So there is high impact, high cost, there is high cost, there is. What have we decided? Is this, you are the one I trust.
Thank you. High cost, high impact.
High cost, high impact. No hotel in your own case. Is there any table that thinks that's correct? Like, it's correct. Like, you sound very assertive, like you've done this before. Yeah.
Switching from diesel generator to solar hybrid system is important and expedient to highlight the fact that as much as we're talking about industrial energy efficiency and resource efficient cleaner production, so switching to that solar hybrid system for any renewable energy solution, solar to be precise, there is high upfront costs. So I think that would actually help us identify that it's going to be high cost. Now, looking at it from the other hand, that switching from diesel generator, now remember, no production facility can function effectively without power. So definitely it is high impact. So I think that summarizes the fact that high impact and high cost.
It sounds to me. Give me a round of applause right now. You know what I like about what you just said? It was the way you ended it. You just did not add, with these few points of mine, I hope I've been able to, and not to, that it is high impact Give him another round of applause. All right. I think the point has been made, and I'm trying to make it again, that do not expect that when you get into a meeting where you're ranking RECP solutions across cost and impact, that there will be alignment or there will be total alignment amongst everybody that will be there. You could have people who would articulate themselves like you just did, and that's compelling. And you'll be surprised that you find someone else, even though you're this compelling, would disagree with you. They would say that this is not a tested, and I'm not saying solar specifically. They can say this is not a tested technology, it's not a proven technology. They can say that we've got relationship with the supplier of diesel. They can say the diesel supplier is the CEO's brother. I'm saying that there's a potential that you would articulate yourself this clearly and someone will still disagree with you. And so it's easy when you look at the slide and you see a 2x2 matrix and you think that you can just plot things in there. The conversations might be tougher. It might be more heated than the one we're having here. And the point ultimately is that strategy is important. Framing this from a profitability perspective, it's everything. I'll sound like a broken record, but it's because that's the truth. That's what I've seen work in practice. That beyond compelling arguments, framing it from a cost perspective, like you just, and I like the way you articulated this, saying, guys, listen, we've got to understand that there will be high upfront cost in its solar, but on a continuing basis relative to diesel, it will be cheaper. In fact, I'm not going to stop it there. I'm going to say that if we calculate the diesel consumption per month and we project it out into the future and we present value that, and we look at the cost of the upfront cost, though high, of solar today, and compare it to the recurring, almost negligible recurring cost of solar, here's what the numbers truly tell us. And if you say it's not a proven technology, you can then say, oh, but we know X and XYZ company that has deployed this and it's working for them. We would not need to have the conversation around what bands you're on, So is this something we should deploy today and start reaping the benefits? Or do we go back to like what we said before, that maybe we start with LEDs and see how much savings we find from that, and that can be the way to convince people that if just retrofitting our electricity system by changing it to LEDs, see the savings we've gotten, imagine that we install, we transform, the system altogether and move away from diesel to solar. That, I think, is the way that the conversation will go. Keep going back. You might need to keep building your case. And that's the point that I think is important that we make. I'm going to show you again and just an indicative solution, but take this with all the things that we've discussed about how, listen, it might not be, this isn't cast in stone. It really depends on the geography. It depends on the situation within the business. Something that I consider high impact might be low impact for your own business. That's the way you should think about this. I like this one, posting energy saving signage for staff. Like when we see zebra crossing, we still drive. You think posting energy signage. But you know what? Even if it is just one person, it might just impact to one person. And the fact that something is low impact doesn't mean that it's not the great first, step to take. The key takeaway here ultimately is if you've got something that is high impact and low cost, that's really the sweet spot, right? Imagine something that's really affordable but will drive a lot of impact. That's sort of the place you want to be, but there's a recognition of the fact that you might not always get that, because something that is low cost, I promise you,
might rarely ever deliver truly an impact. Okay, so I think that we should those are the questions you can ask around problems and opportunities. Should we deploy it in-house? What are the alternative solutions that are available? How long will it take? When we talk about cost, sometimes we only think again about financial cost. How about the time elements to this? What you might consider something might be expensive and still then take a long time and might not be low impact, right? So you want to be sure that they are not only project milestones. You want to be sure that it's a viable solution and that you've tested the minimum viable solution. Sometimes I say ensure that you found someone that has done this and there is tangible evidence for it, except you're a first mover in your industry, in which case you have the risk appetite for testing new and unproven technology sometimes. And then there should be metrics. If it's not measured, it's not done. Not only is it not done, it's not properly managed, right? So there should be metrics as well. So this is just, again, indicative questions. Obviously, you don't have to frame them this way, but they're just ways to think through, your business case development. Again, sometimes it will be before the implementation of the project. Let's stop and think through what are the operating costs, and not just from a financial perspective, but also, all these other environmental elements in it. And then after we've implemented it, what are the gains? So then that's also important that you think through cost and cost benefit and do a cost benefit analysis before we implement this thing. What's the current cost today? After we implement it, what are the savings or what's the reduction in cost that we get? So is freshwater consumption going down? Is labor cost the same? Are we getting savings from avoided sewer fees? Are we getting brand image up? And now, it's usually difficult to put a number on brand image. I want to take a picture. I don't find like that now, my bros. All right, so we've come to the end of that section. If I was on the other side, I'll be asking for a break. So I think that we should take a 15 or 10 minutes break to just stretch our legs, and then we'll go get into the final stretch. Those guys are ready for us, so let's take a 10 or 15 minutes break, or 10 minutes break actually.
Working lecture thus far. I think he deserves a very good overall applause. I'm privileged once again to attend your training. Always thought-provoking, and you always speak like that, Jebo and Binto that you are. So keep it up, sir. Thank you. Sir, my question is just a very simple one. This energy audit, who is in a better position to carry it out? Are there professionals inclined to that, or somebody somewhere will do it? Because for me, I have some machines and all what's not. I hope you are listening, sir. At the moment, I have some machines and all. I produce pencil from recycled newspaper anyway. But I'm always confused. How do I carry the energy of it? Then two, here, if I now go for solar, in the last 2-3 days, even in my premises, solar was no longer working because of the weather condition. Then I just came back from Kano. I spent like 30 days. And I was amazed with the level of the solar that they use there. And I think perhaps from that place upward, they are really into, and there are more people. In fact, it got to a stage, I went to a shop one Igbo man, I started asking questions. I saw panels like skyscrapers. And the third day when I passed through, the whole thing was gone. You know? So what that was telling me is like they have farms, you know, for those things, perhaps far north. And one thing I take home is there was a time the degree of the sun in Kano was about 40 degrees centigrade. When you are inside it, you won't be sweating, but you'll be feeling the intensity of the heat. You know, and even the hostel I stayed, they didn't really care about electricity per se. I mean, PCA. Once it goes automatically, the thing comes up. Then it got to a stage I need to ask them, how are you doing it? They said it's solar, that the whole of the rooftop is panel. You know, so but here the reverse seems at times to be the case. And if you are having equipment, can you really power them with solar? You know, thank you so very much, sir. Well done, and God bless you, sir.
In terms of the energy audits, I think this is the reason why the instructor said we have so many people here. And it's also nice to say I can share a contact with you in terms of the energy audit. Really, just to actually know what is the quantity of power that most of your equipment used. That's just it. So once you have knowledge, so you can make a decision on what to do, whether to reduce it, buy some or install some energy conservation materials or machines to reduce that energy. In the long course, it's also going a way to reduce the cost of operation, right? Then in terms of the power, in terms of solar, right? There are so many ways you can actually go about the solar. Like in Lagos Business School, we did what is known as a hybrid solution. You know, you can use your solar at the same time you are using your generator. But what you are aiming at is actually whether to reduce your diesel consumption. Because you know that diesel today is not cheap. Right? If you're able to drive that down, you can also reduce the money you spend on diesel. Again, you can do full-time solar. So if you do your energy audits and you know the amount of power you are using, that will enable them to actually advise you the amount of panels that you need to buy, the battery bank that you need to have, you know. So I think it's something doable. Maybe we can discuss after this. Thank you.
Sorry, by way of information, I can see the way this thing is flowing. As part of the package for this project, companies will be selected because it's expensive to actually conduct energy audit. It's not cheap because you need to pay for the consultant. By the way, the LBS one, incidentally, I was privileged to be the national supervisor of that project. It's under SUNREF. We did it under SUNREF, the first one. The fund was provided by AFD, Agency for State Development. And luckily, well, MAN was also privileged. I led that team that managed the project project management unit. I think at that time, the funds came in euro. We shared between two banks, Access and UB. I don't know whether you got yours through Access. Access, fantastic. So this is a different kettle of fish. In this case, UNIDO with foresight has included it as part of the package. But however, because it's expensive, and we're not going to be able to do for all companies. So we have developed metrics which we'll use to determine. Some I've written earlier, those that are smart, very smart, because we always announce it. Those that have attended previous workshop. If you're interested, tell your management, write officially that you'd like to be part of the CPA. CPA is incidentally a combination of energy audit and also assessment for cleaner production. So our international experts will be coming in and they will do it free of charge. And after the exercise, you also have access to the report
With the content of the report, you will know which equipment is responsible for what. You also know what you need to change. And that is why the wisdom of UNIDO, this is also included as part of the package, so that eventually when you have the audit report or the report of the CPA, the assessment, you can put up something together. Of course, we are still available to support free of charge to ensure that you put something forward to Bank of Industry. Incidentally, in this project, it's Bank of Industry that is handling the component 4, which is the financing, the funding component of the project. So, sir, what you will do is possibly to approach the LPC after this session, so they will check. Apparently, you've not written officially to say you are interested. I wanted to keep this till tomorrow. If you are seated here and we've sent questionnaires to you, because the international consultant wanted a situation where such companies will provide preliminary information that can help in even doing assessments, so that when they're on ground, they can manage their time effectively and also be able to add value, maximum value, ahead of time. With that information, they can already be thinking of what to do to support. If you know you have received questionnaires and you have yet to complete them or return them to us, please endeavor to do so. It's not for everyone, but if you have received, it simply means your management has written to us requesting that you would like to be part of that process. So I think I've been able to address your concerns, sir. Sir. Yeah. So it's free. You don't need to pay anybody or refer out to anybody.
So I'm mindful of time.
Sterling Bank, Renewable Energy and Sustainability Finance Group. I was quite encouraged when the question was asked. The reason being that I'm equally inspired that when additional feedback was given as for Bank of Industry and what it takes to get the job done. And I'm glad that we have technical expertise from those from the LBS as well. So putting it all together, we've identified the fact that yes, it's expensive. It has a lot of high cost implication to get the energy audit done. And our partnership both with local and foreign renewable energy developers that we vetted, we've onboarded as developers for the bank, can help every institution participate in this adoption of renewable energy solution. So as per the energy audit that was mentioned, if you have been selected, taking it from the last feedback is that if you have the reports of what your energy needs are, the next thing is how do I adopt the solution? That's where we come in as a bank. And when he mentioned Bank of Industry, there are local development finance institutions that on behalf of companies like yourself and others, we can issue a guarantee, performance guarantee, and any other required financing needs from them. So putting it all together is that everybody here as a manufacturing company needs power, and that is where we come to play. So any of your needs, whether it's you want to add solar energy or renewable to your energy mix, where you are talking to the experts. And I'm able to say, in renewable energy in Nigeria, Sterling Bank stands tall as a pioneer institution. We don't just talk about it, we practice what we preach. So if you check our head office at Marina, it is fully solarized by aesthetics and even energy generation, and we are doing additional to optimize energy generation. So please, if you are looking for a financial institution to support your business in adopting this cleaner solution, look no further. Look to Sterling Bank. Thank you very much.
Far away, Luyo. Akishola, you need to you pay for adverts. Okay.
Accessing funding and all that. So this is it. It's very simple. BOI is in partnership with UNIDO and Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Rather than saying people should be applying directly to us, I think the best thing to do is to apply through MAN. Then MAN will present your applications to the Bank of Industry. We have various offices that handle the applications. Another thing I would also then say, like he said, in terms of collateralizing, we work with, like he mentioned, Sterling Bank. They can guarantee you. So just make your applications to UNIDO and MAN, and they will get it across to Bank of Industry. Thank you.
We're not even done with day one. We already know where to go and collect money. Maybe we should finish the person is offering money. He's only consultant and not offering money. All right, so at this point, I want us to take like a 10-minute break. We're really behind time, so let's take a 10-minute break, stretch our legs, let consultants to rest more, and then we land the plane. And by landing the plane, I mean getting the funding that we want, or even just convincing much more than that. It's not just clarifying the vision, it's trying to drive implementation, right? You will talk about the problem, but will not talk possible for it. So a business plan, a well-written business plan doesn't just clarify your values, it also helps to guide the implementation of the solution. Talking about in the context of an IE/RECP business plan. So I'm talking more like, almost like a project plan, right? I find it interesting that people would write a plan and they start with an example. Finance, how far? We don't write plan.
Thank you.
I've seen some bankers that are not as nice looking as he is. I don't know whether you are nice. I just know that you are nice looking. So I've seen some other bankers that even though you've written a great plan, you should be able to, tell us how this ties back into the environmental or the broader sustainability impact that you're dealing with. Reliability, leading to elevated emissions and operating costs. I promise you, when you write your business plan, the problem or opportunity statement will not be 3 lines. I'm just helping you to see how to frame the different elements, how to integrate and incorporate the different elements of a problem statement into something like this. Tomorrow we will not do 10 pages for business plan. I will not lie to you, these pros will not read 10 pages of problem statement. You want to keep it succinct, but there's a balance between, there's a balance to it. You don't want it to be too lengthy, but you also don't want to act as if you didn't even put any thought into it. Right. So let's not forget 3 elements of a problem statement. The operational challenge, we too they use water. Describe the cost. This water they cost us money. Outline the savings opportunity. Well, this thing would drive up pollution because we know even they dispose them well. You can tell that I'm also tired already, so I'm shifting into my Nigerian gear from my Canadian gear. All right, so what's the proposed RECP solution? I've also made it simple, and I've said, let's keep it at 3 points as well. Your solution statement should have 3 things. Obviously, you should describe the solution, but do not stop there. What's the technical approach to this solution? Don't just say I'm doing solar power. Tell us about what sort of solar PV is it? What's the sizing? Would it be rooftop solar? Is it community solar? Are you going to be sending it back to the grid? You want to describe the technical aspect of the solution as clearly as possible, but as technically as necessary. And then the third part is, well, how does this solution align with the RECP or IEE principles? Again, a sample solution statement can read something like this. Installing a waste heat recovery system on the boiler flue will allow, for preheating processed water, reducing fuel demand by 25%. Right? Again, you'll notice that you've included what the solution is, that there's a preheating of processed water in there. That's sort of like the technical approach and process, and it helps to reduce fuel demand. Problem, 3 things. Solution, 3 things. The McKinsey people will say, if you want to sound smart, say there are 3 things that I want you guys to remember. Don't say 2, it looks too small. Don't say 4, it looks too long. Say 3, 3 is the magic number. And so I borrowed that from the McKinsey folks who just charge us money and develop fancy looking stuff. And I'm applying that to this training. so that we can remember. So in problem statement, define the problem, what's the risk, what's the cost implication. With solution, what's the solution, what's the technical approach, how does it align with RECD principles.
Rules to cross. It's important to say all of that. But there are people who then go and say, in 1970, how is that relevant to, to what we're saying today? People go and copy and paste. They go on Google, solar power, whatever, and just copy and paste that. And there's nothing wrong with, researching. That's why it's called market and regulatory context. But you want it to be context specific. You want to apply it to your own specific context. Don't just go and copy and paste, things off the internet without applying it to the specific context that you're dealing with. So you want to provide industry overview in there. Competition is important. You want to at least help us understand what competition is doing. Are there any environmental regulations out there? And what's happening in supply chain, or how does this impact supply chain? The implementation plan, I've spoken about it briefly. Again, there are 3 things to consider. You want to talk about whether we should be doing this internally or whether we should get consultants. What part of the process should we bring in consultants? Can we do a part of it ourselves? Can we do it ourselves but with just a little training? Can training bridge the knowledge gap that we have internally, or do we need consultants to come in? Do we need consultants to come in to just do the pilot phase and we will take on the rest of it? Or is this something that consultants absolutely have to do? If you want to bring in external partners or vendors, what's their track record? What have they done this for before? Where have they deployed it? And what's been their experience in those places? And have they deployed this in an industry that is not exactly our own and they are just trying to use, idea? And it's not like idea is bad, but we want to be sure that they can actually deliver what they've promised that they will deliver. After that, we want to think about, beyond just whether we want to do it internally or externally, what's the site condition? We should be articulating that as well. Is there availability for this equipment? Someone says they want to do rooftop solar, but they list the space. The landlord has not given approval, and you write a business plan about rooftop solar. You see that you're just joking. So you want to be sure that there's space availability for it. Sometimes we would say we want to do rooftop solar, but we will not size it appropriately. We probably don't have enough surface area or space for what will power our own building. And in that sense, we would then say solar is not working. Solar doesn't carry anything. It's because of improper sizing, improper capacity sizing. Is that site accessible? We need to train our workforce as well. And then this bit almost always missing is this implementation timeline. Almost always missing in the plans that I see. People will write everything but not talk about the time it will take. And please, let's be realistic with time. Not only time, with our financials as well. Historically, you've only made 10 million naira per year. You want to go and see the banker, you say it's 1 billion. Let's especially with forecasts, right? Like when we project and we get financial strategy in a second. I've seen all sorts of forecasts. We've been doing 10 million per month, and then our financial forecast, even though we're not developing a new production line, even though there's no new product entering the market, even though our customer base is not expanding, we're not expanding. But by some magic, our financial forecast will then say it is 250 million we'll start making every month. Because that's what will give you the ratio that you want, that will get Sterling happy. Let's be realistic with the timelines. What action we want to take and what the response is. We should then think about how we intend to monitor, report, and verify what's being deployed. It's not enough that we talk about the implementation timeline and plan. What KPIs will we be monitoring? If we've said that there'll be cost savings of 20 million naira, for example, per month,
what did we save in month one? Did we save the 20? Did we save 15? Is the cost savings getting better? Are we learning better? Is it 15 million because we've not fully understood the system? Is it that the operational efficiencies we're not fully capturing? So there should be KPIs and there should be monitoring in place. And even though we don't like auditors, we need auditors to be a partner with us on this. And what tool or system will we be using to monitor? And we should try and commit to transparency. If the savings we're getting is 15 million, let's look at ourselves and say, even though the plan said we should get a 20 million naira saving, we're getting a 15 million naira savings. What should we, what's the takeaway? Did we overestimate? Or are there things that we haven't learned just yet? All right, so you see, financial strategy starts out with the request and structure, not the metrics. How much do we need? How do we intend to find this money? Are we going to be co-funding this? Will someone dash us the money? Are we going to see money on the floor and carry it? Is someone going to forget money inside car? We'll see it. Is the federal government going to dash us this money? You get the point. We've got to think about where we would source the financing from. And then we get into financial projections. Finance people like this one. They want to flex their muscle. Or now, they want to speak financial jargon. ROI, IRR, payback. They like saying those things. But how does it tie back to, some people say, let me not come for finance. All right, so you're thinking about how much are we saving, what's the payback period, what's the internal rate of return or return on investment, that's IRR and ROI. And then do we want to do sensitivity analysis? As simple as that is, people often forget to do it. And that's why you would project that there'll be a 20 million naira saving and you will not have flexed your assumptions to accommodate for, but what if we don't fully realize it? If it's 15 million, does it still work? If it's 25 million, is there a world where it'll be 25 million? Right? You want to do upper and lower bound, sensitivity analysis to your assumptions. You want to test the reasonableness of your underlying assumption. And I can hand over the mic to you at this point because this is the part that you like. These are some sample financial metrics. I won't bore you with this because there's another mission where we will bring Excel and our laptops and we will all become financial gurus. Well, maybe not gurus, but don't let me overpromise. But we would all at least live knowing how to calculate the basic metrics. The finance people in the room are exceptional professionals, but I promise you there's nothing they do that if someone like me who isn't very smart can do it, I promise we can all do it. That's coming from the guy who wanted to do pharmacy and got agricultural economics. You see the road for. But if I can do it, so you guys can do it. Because I'm just seeing engineers everywhere in the room. So this is some of the financial metrics that we need to show to people. One of those that the bankers like called debt service coverage ratio. They want to be sure that if they give you this money, do you have sufficient cash flows to cover the value? Do not pose significant increase in credit risk, meaning that you have not gone past due for more than 30 days. But let's leave the English for now. We'll do it in mission 2. And maybe our bros, please ensure you attend that so that every time I lie, you can at least catch my lie. So that's how they size the amount of loan to give to you. It's this fancy thing there called debt service coverage ratio. And what that thing is saying essentially is what is your earnings before interest and tax, and they will divide it by your loan repayment, so principal and interest. And there's a target ratio they want to get. And it is only the loan that will get them to that target ratio that they will give to you. That means we can hack it ourselves. We can go to the bank knowing confidently that if we say 50 million, we will get that 50 million because we've done the calculation ourselves. And if the bank say to you, it's not 50 million, we can say to them, we know that we can meet the principal and interest repayment
not only because we can make it today based on our earnings before interest and tax, we also expect that there will be increased revenue and profitability into the future based on our projected cash flows. In fact, our DSCR will be enhanced every year from say 1.7x to 2.5x based on our projection. We will get there. The bankers will challenge you, of course, but because of the thing we will learn here, we would not walk away not knowing what to say to them. This is a busy slide. We will share the slides, by the way, so I see a lot of people like taking pictures and all of those. I've gotten permission from my others that, I've given permission to my others that they can share the slide. So the risk categories that we have up here, and I see that immediately I said we will share the slide, people were like, yeah, let's slide. This is the guinea pig for the remaining, this session is the guinea pig for the remaining training that I will do. When I go to, I just pity them in Kano. There's no lunch until we finish the entire project. There's one person who will eat, drink fura, they know now, you know, go to take training. Risk categories, they range from technical, meaning that, and I'll just point out a few. What if this technology does not perform like we say that it will? We've built castle in the sky about the possibility of this technology, but there's the risk that it might underperform our expectation. For example, the energy efficient boiler that's been pitched to us by this engineering company that can work miracles, all those meds, and I stop calling it drugs because you can't call it drug outside of here. Say, sorry, can you step aside, sir? Okay, so those people that would say this medicine, if it's headache, he will do it. If it's cancer, he will do it. They used to have one megaphone like this. There are people here that are not Yoruba people, so let's be inclusive. The medicines there are people that even confirm it to me. They are not doctors, they are saying there are medicines like that. I believe you now. Yes, now. That's why someone will come and say there is boiler system that can be only light. You will say there are boilers like that. That's how it starts. So there's a risk that the technology might underperform. So how do we solve for that? Well, there's something that auditors, and I'll say the good side of auditors, is when an auditor comes to you and they say, tell me about your process, they will typically ask, tell me the process. Once you tell them the process, the next thing they will say is, show me the process. And so when an engineering team or whatever comes and says, there's a energy efficient boiler, you take, can you show me? That's one way to mitigate that risk. Can you show me? And it can be, can you show me where you've deployed an energy system of a similar size, that's similar to our own problem, and let's see what the cost savings have been. Can you show me what other people you've deployed this for? Can you tell me the challenges you did not envisage when you were pitching to them that then ultimately happened? Can you tell me the way that their own system is different from mine and what you've built in place to address those differences and the uniqueness between both of our systems? Can you show me? It's a question that you want to ask anybody that walks into the door to pitch to you. We'll take another one. Let's say financial risk. There's the potential for budget overruns or inability to recover costs as planned. The example is the project payback period is delayed due to higher than expected capex. There are only a few, and this is industrial scale, there are only a few nuclear plants that have been built to budget, on time, and as planned. There may be just a handful in the world, because we would always underestimate the cost. In fact, there are budget overruns of 3x the initial budget. Someone in Nigeria typically says, fact check me. Fact check me. There are only a handful of, I start the son of the soil, I say, go and verify this thing I'm telling you. There are only a handful of nuclear projects, especially in the US and North America, that have been built on budget, as planned, on time. Only a handful. Because, and I'm saying, obviously, I can imagine smartest people in the world, they still always underestimate the cost. Now, there's another element to it, which is political risk, which is that one person can come in today and say that deploying nuclear will cause problems across the world and then just suddenly stop it. There's something happening, for example, at the moment where our friend south of my border said, you know what? We're going to suspend every federal license for offshore wind projects. So it doesn't matter that you've actually even collected money, you've gotten site permits, you're already building the project. We're just suspending it. Try an executive order. We won't get into DT today. DJT. All right, so the point is that there are a host of risks that you've got to think about, and don't just list out the risks. It's important that you think about what the mitigation strategy is. If you give me a plan that lists out risk and does not have mitigation strategy, you're almost saying to me, by the way, this is the list of the reasons why this thing won't work. And you are, but you know, we have people that are nice bankers and they are likely going to give you money if you just list out risk. But they can look nice and actually they do their thorough job. They will be nice and nicely tell you that this money you want to collect, you go downstairs to go and collect it. Or you go to a hotel to collect it. All right, let's bring this home. So, other considerations, and after I touched on this, it just makes sense that if you're doing an RECP or IE plan, that it should include environmental, but not just environmental, but also social impact. It's because, remember what I wrote there was the architecture of a bankable plan. And so this applies not only to RECP or IEA plans, you can use this structure, this same structure applies to non-RECP plans. But I take your feedback and I'm happy to take out like the other considerations and just call it environmental and social impact because it's equally as important. So all of this is saying that, and I like the social one. See this, there's the risk of high or excessive noise levels. You come to a residential area, you take big loudspeaker like this, put it on top of it, and you go at ridiculous decibels, causing noise pollution, because there are really people that will come and knock you down, tear down the thing. That's a social issue. I've not called anybody's name. I'm not giving any company's example. I'm not giving any religious house example. I'm just saying that those things that we get away with here, that we just would wake up one day and say it is nice to plaster all the road. Do you know that people have protested against wind installations because it causes visual pollution? Even I find it ridiculous that because I'm driving and there are just these wind poles on the road where it is green before, I don't want there to be poles there, and I'll go and protest against it. And that can be the basis upon which that project will not be approved. visual. Which one the visual pollution? But I'm saying that these are the kind of things that we take for granted. Like, how can someone say visual pollution, but the actual pollution we don't even consider? Right? You go into a community where there's one water source. I've seen mines. You go into a community where there's one water source, no community engagement. You go there and go and carry the water. Tomorrow you say they are keep. And I'm not advocating for, let's be clear, I'm not advocating for violence and saying that, in fact, I'll take out order from that thing. I'm saying that these are critical elements of financing that the banks before now didn't used to consider, but has now become extremely important. I'll give you one final example on this, environmental risk. There are places now where, we heard about the California wildfires, and I apologize if I'm using foreign examples. I promise that I'll try to look for more Nigerian examples. Sorry? Yeah. We've got facilitators here too. We don't need international experts again by next year. That's the but I enjoy local examples actually, and I apologize. In fact, it's a feedback that I'm giving myself already that I'll try to look for more local examples.
Okay, so there was a project at Abaji. Yeah, Abaji is supposed to be opposite of Nestle. If you know Abaji, where Nestle water is,